Thank you, Jerry. Every once in a while, someone will come up to me or I'll be walking by and they'll say, your knee must be really hurting today. And I'll think, I didn't even know I was limping. I've got a bad knee. I do have a limp most days. I hope I don't limp all the time, but it seems like I do. But my knee has become so much a part of me, I don't always notice that I'm limping. I'm not doing it intentionally like I would when I was a kid. When I was a kid and I'd skin my knee, I would limp, like exaggerated limp. Even if I hurt my arm, I would limp. Or if my stomach hurt, I would limp. I think lots of kids do that. I want to show you a picture. Brian, could you show me the picture? Let me know if you know who this person is. Walter Brennan. Actor Walter Brennan. A couple things that are very interesting about Walter Brennan. One of them is he won 3 Academy Awards for acting. Only 2 other men have done that, Daniel Day-Lewis and Jack Nicholson. Katharine Hepburn won 4, but he's tied for the lead for men who have won acting awards. The second thing about Walter Brennan, and he was known for his limp. Okay? Now, he limped in his movies, and a lot of people speculated about why he had a limp. There were stories that he had gotten hurt in World War I, and he had been limping since that day forward. There are reports that as a child he had contracted polio or another disease that caused him to limp the rest of his life. The truth was this: he put a pebble in his shoe. It was an intentional limp. He did it for one movie where he was a younger person and he had to play someone older. So he put a pebble in his shoe, so he limped, so he came across as older. And it worked so well, he won an Academy Award, that he pretty much did that for every role going forward. To the point where people just assumed Walter Brennan, the actor, actually had a limp. But he didn't. And I find that kind of fascinating. And it also makes me wonder, as we look at our Old Testament reading for today, there's lots of things. Jacob walked with a limp. Probably the most well-known limp in the Bible. The only limp that I can think of in the Bible, but Jacob walked with a limp. There are a lot of theologians that believe that Jacob walked with a limp the rest of his life because of this interaction that he has. Now, whether that was intentional or not, we don't know, but it is still fascinating. Now, before Jacob developed this limp, Jacob was very conniving, all right? Jacob's name means grasping at the heel. When Jacob was born with his twin brother Esau, he apparently was grasping at his older brother's heel as he came out. He was not a very good younger brother to Esau. He swindled Esau out of his birthright by fooling his father. Esau and Jacob came to become bitter enemies, to the point where Jacob had to flee with his whole family, all of his possessions, and they fled to Haran for 20 years. Now, after 20 years, he decides to go back to the Promised Land. And as he's going back to the Promised Land, he gets word that Esau had heard that he's coming back, and he heard that Esau was coming to meet him, but he heard that Esau was coming with 400 men. And Jacob was very afraid. So Jacob sends his entire family, his servants, all of his possessions across the river, and Jacob is alone and decides that in the morning he will meet Esau and all of his men alone and beg for mercy and see what happens. So that night he is on pins and needles. Have you ever had that where you're trying to get some sleep, but something really important is going to happen in the morning? Whether you're going to get test results, or whether some sort of meeting or some sort of event that you're either dreading or you're fearful of, and you're trying to sleep and you just can't. I heard a story about a woman who was having lots of trouble with insomnia, and it had been days since she had been able to sleep. So she goes and she sees a doctor, and the doctor tells her, you have to leave your troubles in one room and then go and get into bed, and don't get into bed with your troubles. And she says, but my husband insists that he can't sleep alone. Not a true, well, probably a true story. I don't know. Whoops. So Jacob has one of those nights, and Jacob literally wrestles with God all night long. Now the passage calls it, in the NIV says he wrestles with a man. Just nonchalantly says, and Jacob wrestled with a man until daybreak. Who was this man? Now, later on in this passage, Jacob calls the place Peniel because he had seen God face to face. So we assume the man was some sort of divine being. Later on in the Old Testament, the prophet Hosea refers to Jacob wrestling with an angel, and that tends to be the accepted historical person who Jacob wrestled. He wrestled some sort of angel in that moment. And the angel comes to him, and they wrestle. And during this wrestling match, impromptu wrestling match, the angel is losing. Jacob is overcoming. So the angel strikes Jacob on the hip, dislocating his hip. But Jacob still holds on to him and won't let him go. And the angel pleads with him, let me go, and I'll give you a blessing. So Jacob asks not only for a blessing, but he says, the angel asks Jacob first, what is your name? Jacob tells him, and then the angel gives him a different name. He says, from now on you will be called Israel, which actually means struggles with God and overcomes, or wrestles with God, fights with God and overcomes. This is where the name Israel comes from. The name of the actual people of Israel, the nation of Israel, means struggles with God and overcomes. So, the angel gives him that name. Jacob asks for the person's name. He won't give it, but he does bless Jacob at that point and at that moment. So then what happens? Jacob walks with a limp from that time forward. Now, after the limp, this becomes kind of a linchpin moment for Jacob. Before this, Jacob had been very conniving. But after this, after Jacob had wrestled with God, something happened inside of him. And for the rest of his life, Jacob was different. Now, someone's angry. But I'm telling the truth. I'm so sorry to embarrass you, Emily. All right. Now, what happens in the morning surprises Jacob. Esau comes to Jacob, but instead of a conflict, Esau forgives his brother. Welcomes him in, and allows his brother and entire family to come and live in the promised land. And from that day forth, Jacob becomes a different person. Becomes a person who works with Esau, works with his brother, becomes a man of God because of this wrestling match. And there are people who said this limp that Jacob had after the wrestling match was permanent. Meaning either he had such an injury that he limped the rest of his life, or, I think a little more interestingly, many theologians believe Jacob walked with a limp the rest of his life to remind him of God's blessing. To remind him of God's blessing. Now, there's something to that. Remembering our brokenness and remembering our blessing. And sometimes we think, how can getting a dislocated hip be a blessing. Oftentimes we're told, don't doubt God, don't wrestle with God, don't struggle against God. Yet here we see Jacob doing it all night, literally wrestling with an angel. And I think not only does something good come out of it, but he is blessed in that moment, and his life is changed. Many of us wrestle with God all the time, yet we feel guilty for it. Something terrible happens. We have a death in the family. Someone gets a health diagnosis that we did not want. Someone in our life disappoints us. And we wrestle with God and we think, why did this happen? And we wrestle with God thinking, how could you let this happen? We see natural disasters. We see famine. We see other things. We see another mass shooting. And I think there was one in Idaho just last night. And we think, why is this happening? Yet we're told oftentimes, well, don't wrestle with God. Yet I think it's something we inherently do. And I think not only is it okay, it's something God wants us to do. God would much rather have us wrestle with him than ignore him. God would much rather us stay up late at night struggling with how things happen than just saying and praying about it and praying to God about it and almost demanding answers from God instead of ignoring God. Blessings and brokenness. There's a quote. Brian, could you pull that up? Thank you. And it's a 2-slide quote. If I want to engage with God, that I must expect that I will be changed in the process, and not always in ways that are painless or comfortable or easy. I can't dictate the terms of blessing. I can't say, I want the blessing but not the limp. Sometimes the blessing is the limp. Debbie Thomas from her book, Journey with Jesus. Sometimes the limp is the blessing. Sometimes another way of saying it is sometimes our scars are blessings. Sometimes our scars oftentimes tell a story. There's a great scene in the movie Jaws where the 3 men aboard the Orca are below deck. And these 3 men do not get along. But they start bonding over their scars and the stories behind those scars. And they start seeing each other. And they realize each scar tells a unique story. Many of us, I would imagine to say all of us, have some sort of scar. Not physical, but some sort of spiritual scar. Some sort of spiritual brokenness that is in itself a blessing. Is in itself a blessing. Because it tells a story. Because it says, I struggled with God and I have overcome. Each scar is a blessing. Our brokenness is a blessing. And we need to remember that. Speaking of remembering, this is what we do when we approach the table. Every first Sunday of the month here at St. John's, we celebrate communion. When we approach the table, metaphorically, because we're going to pass things around, but as you take the bread and you take the cup, we ask that you remember. Most of that is, there's many things that happen at the table. We are united with the whole church everywhere. We are nourished in our faith journeys. But primarily, we want to remember. And not just remember Christ and his sacrifice, which is key, but it's also where we can remember today. I'd like you also to remember your brokenness. I want you to remember those scars that you have and give thanks for them, because they tell a story that you can share about struggling and overcoming. Amen.